Adequate notice of the February the 13th, 2020 meeting has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting written notice in the agenda of this meeting on the bulletin board in the Municipal Building, 1000 Route 10, Township of Hanover, by hand delivering, mailing, or faxing such notice and agenda to the following newspapers: Forest County's Daily Record, the Star Ledger, Hanover Eagle, and by filing same Township Clerk. May I have a roll call?
Committeeman Gallagher.
Here.
Committeeman Faramaska.
Here.
Committeeman Mahalko.
Here.
Committeeman Cahill.
Here.
And Mayor Francioli.
Here.
5 members in attendance, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, would you all please rise? Those that can, join me in a pledge allegiance to the flag. Remain standing for a prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Almighty God, we ask that you bless this governing body with an abundance of wisdom and understanding so that every deliberation will result in actions which will promote the common good and the general welfare for all of the people of Hanover Township. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, John. Please be seated. Okay, gentlemen, at this time, I'd like to, we're opening the meeting, 2 occasions for this meeting. We're opening now, and we'll open toward the end of the meeting. But motion to open to the public.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let me just state some basic rules that we've been adhering to. Okay, at this time, comments will be limited to 4 minutes. If the comments elicit a question or a response or an answer, certainly we'll take that into consideration. Please be courteous enough to take the podium opportunity at the podium for 1 speaker, 1 opportunity at the podium. Is remind regular meetings. I don't have to remind everybody that Township Committee meetings are videotaped and broadcasted on Optima's Channel 21 between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock. I didn't know that on Saturdays. Have to catch that. In any event. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. If you'd like to address the Township Committee at this time, please do so from the podium, giving us your name and address for the record. Terry, it's all yours.
Good evening, Terry Baird, 180 Parsippany Road in the Whippany section of Hanover. I have some questions in reference to the agenda. I'd like to note in the resolution part what G and H are about.
Where are you now?
The resolutions as a consent agenda. G is approving a Municipal Services Act agreement between the Township and Whippany Crossing and further authorizing the mayor and Township clerk to execute the agreement.
Well, G pertains to the condominium development, which is located at the corner of Whippany Road and Park Avenue. And under state law, which is known as the Municipal Services Act, we're required to enter into an agreement to provide certain basic services, such as sanitation pickup, snow removal, and also to cover the cost of electricity for the street lights. So that's what that's all about.
Okay, so our town's going to pick up their garbage and
Yes.
and do plow their roads?
That's correct.
That's okay, because in some of the
If we don't,
agreements...
and what happens, Terry, if they plow the roads themselves,
Yeah,
we have a reimbursement formula based on how much it costs us to plow our roads, and we pay them based on that formula.
okay,
So this is all required by state law, which is known as the Municipal Services Act.
okay, thank
And
you.
then H is phase...
I was wondering how much the grant was this time, how much we were accepting.
$172,000.
Okay, 172,000.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's for the continuation of Phase 3 of the trail.
Right.
Connectivity plan. Yep.
Okay, and also, I have some issues with the current newspaper that came out, and I see that there are some things that are in there that seem to be somewhat erroneous, I think. So I wanted some clarification as to the newspaper article. The first article about the time running out for Pine Plaza, it states that the Township Committee last year had voted to condemn under eminent domain only the Midas Muffler Shop and at the eastern portion of the property. And my recollection is that you didn't just single out Midas Muffler, that it was the entire Pine Plaza. And the reason why I bring this up is because in the editorial, it says, "And now it is down to its last 8 tenants. 3 of those, a pizza place, a karate studio, and a breakfast restaurant, have been Pine Plaza's most successful stores of the past several years. A 4th, Midas, is condemned under eminent domain." Is Midas Muffler condemned?
Fred, you want to respond to that, please?
No, that's a newspaper article?
Mhm, it's to-
Oh, it's yours, okay. No, the governing body clearly, my recollection is, the ordinance for redevelopment was non-condemnation. So, and there is no condemnation that's permitted by law under that redevelopment area designation, and there's no plans for any type of condemnation, even with respect to the Midas, because it's my understanding that the Midas is about to go under contract, which, with the actual developer or purchaser of the Pine Plaza shopping
Okay,
center. So there is none.
I just didn't want people to think that Midas is condemned and closed when, they're, and not go there.
No,
And
if there was a condemnation, there would be an ordinance. We don't have the authority because of what we did last summer as a governing body, but there would be an ordinance introduced and an appraisal and all of that. None of those steps have been taken, and it has not been condemned, and it's not eligible.
Okay. And then, actually, Mr. Sumrall, in the other time running out article, it says there are about 28 acres on the Pine Plaza site that probably won't ever be developed, according to Township Attorney Fred Sumrall.
I don't know the context of what that,
It's just
I said that last year, you said it last year.
28 acres on the Pine Plaza site?
28 acres is the site.
It's
Not that
28
large.
acres is the
The
site.
site's not that large.
I know, so there's no site, my reference to this is that there is no area of the entire Pine Plaza site that won't be developed, like the entire thing is going to be developed. There's no set aside of,
Well,
you know.
yeah, one of us is wrong, I hope it's not me, but, no, but I think the point is that there was an agreement for certain residential housing on the Pine Plaza site, and it said there'd be no more on the Pine Plaza site and the redevelopment. That, no matter what any other attributes of that development, it's maxed out as far as residential development.
okay, all right, okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. The floor remains open. Anyone like to address the committee?
Jeff Basile, 21 Washington Avenue, Whippany side of town. So in the December meeting, I was here, and we were talking about the land right next to my home or behind my home, the land with the junkyard and the truck depot, and you guys said you pulled off that introduction and it may be coming back up in the future if you can't find any other land. You also made a comment that the land that you were looking for was land that you didn't want to really be developed. That was what Mr. Mayor said then, and I remember you saying, like, overlay zones, you really don't want them to be developed. Wondering why that land keeps getting brought up when we're 100% sure that it would be developed. We know that Mr. Kitchell is willing to sell. I'm sure you guys know that. I know we all know who the builder would be. Mr. Mayor, I'm sure you know who that is. He actually contributed to your last campaign. So my question is why are we going to reintroduce this? You had the town speak out already against this, and understanding that there's other situations and other things, I do want to know why, this keeps coming up.
Let me take the last part of your comment first. I have no business relationship with this developer, although the innuendo that you just made suggests I do. I do not. He was free to contribute to my campaign, he did so, and the campaign accepted it, period. Beyond that, I have no communications with Mr. Forgione. I have not spoken to Mr. Forgione through all of these dealings, yet you insist upon
I
trying to...
made no insist, I made no mention
No,
of
it's
names.
called innuendo, sir, and you know quite well what you're doing, okay?
I made a
Having
statement.
said that, these zones are being looked at by the Township Committee. They're being re-explored, as was said at the last meeting, for alternatives to removing them from those areas. I can't comment beyond that, but I'll turn once again to council, if you want, Fred, at this point, to make any
Yeah.
comment of where we are with this to satisfy this gentleman's question.
Yeah, nobody's bringing that property back up. It just hasn't, we're not able to yet formally decide or put it away, because there was an agreement that included that property to be the overlay. And when you said the words, and I understand what you're saying about, well, because we don't want that, we didn't think that would be developed. The feeling was it was more remote, that would be developed versus some of the other projects that are going forward, because there was, with respect to that property, it was sort of attractive from the standpoint that it has wetlands, power lines, it has property that would necessitate likely some type of cleanup based on the use. But what the committee promised that night and what we've been working diligently on is to see if in fact we can change, because we're contractually bound by it to meet our obligation, if we can change that location for another parcel in town that would be, sort of meet those similar objectives, that maybe it would be remote for that to happen. And just as a way of fact, the fair share housing, which is settled with a majority of municipalities now in Morris County, they really haven't, they have not changed an overlay type zone from their agreement, because they don't really want to get into starting to move these around. But I want to say that we're working diligently to see if that can occur or exhaust that option. And I know that doesn't give you all of the answers, but if I say here tonight exactly where we are, I can tell you that some of the parties that we're negotiating with, it'll affect the outcome. I think we're trying to really resolve that, and
I agree, and
it's
the one...
limited that
And
I
the one
could
thing
say.
that I think the residents asked for were some studies to be done, some traffic studies, some school system studies, if we could actually handle the volume for it. Have we done any? I could tell you for Washington Ave, where this would be through street now, there has not been a traffic study, because they would actually have to put that out there.
Can you continue, sir?
So, I mean, I know that we asked the council to do that due diligence. Has that been done, or are we starting it before we actually reintroduce this?
Well, traffic studies would occur if and when there was ever an application to develop that property. Otherwise, we'd have to do separate traffic studies throughout the township. I think right now, one of the things we've been charged with is to see if there's alternatives to that site, to see if we can get the legal agreement in place to see if we can either, one of a few things, eliminate those two zones, which hasn't really happened throughout the county, as far as I can tell and what Fair Share's saying, and put them somewhere else, which we're working on, or eliminate one of the zones, or it would be to reintroduce. But I can tell you that, to say whether there's studies done, it would almost be, at the moment, not as pressing of as if the committee heard that residents were against it. So traffic studies or no traffic studies, the charge that I had was, see if there's some options available. So that's where we are.
And I appreciate it, but before we reintroduce, I would say maybe, possibly putting that out there would be great for everybody.
Excuse me, I have a question. You said there was a 100% chance that Pioneer Trucking would be sold.
Not 100%, I mean, we know that he's tried to develop the land.
How do you know this? Have you spoken to him? Give us information.
No, I'm just sure that there were points in the past that there's been offers to the business, to the landowners that were in that area. There were contracts shared. I know that...
Contracts?
Yeah, contracts.
Michael, what he's talking about is there were offers in the past.
Correct.
That they're focused on,
it was a
but other developers who make offers on many open sections of land in Hanover Township. It's
Well, I didn't know if you knew something
It's
that
not
we didn't.
unusual.
No.
That's what we
We
want.
can have a conversation. If you like, you could give me a ring anytime.
That's why we're curious, because our understanding is he has no interest in selling. So quite frankly, I'm shocked to hear that he's interested in selling, and I'd like to know how you know that.
Yeah, that's, I just want to clarify. You know, again, we're trying to make a decision here, and,
I'm sorry, I just can't let it go on. I myself spoke with Dick Kitchell when you introduced the ordinance about the overlay zone. I took a copy of it down to him. I met with him in his office. He took it apart. He made copies of it, and he said, I've been waiting for this for a long time. I want to sell. I heard it from his mouth to my ears. So, now you know. You asked the question.
I did.
Well, Terry, I think we're getting a combination of comments and hearsays here. These gentlemen have been meeting with the property owners, ongoing. So they're hearing directly from them. So if Mr. Kitchell intends to sell at some point, we have not heard that. What we have heard is that his business, Pioneer, intends to stay and grow where he is. So unless there's some other
No, that is directly what
comments
we heard.
that you
Very specifically
gentlemen,
and
I have
very,
not
very
had
recently.
contact with Dick, and you gentlemen have been
Yes.
having
Spoke with him
discussions.
4
with-
hours ago,
Yeah.
and he did not indicate, he indicated quite the opposite.
I'm not going to disclose the reason why, because it's personal, but
I don't know, I'd hate to think that he was...
very interested.
Good evening. Thank you again for all your service and the criticism that you take in the public eye. Appreciate that. Just to jump on to the last comment.
Your name and address.
Yeah, sorry.
just for the-
Doug Eman, 48 Washington Ave.
Thank you.
Whitney, sorry. Just to add on to that, I like to try to sometimes put myself into someone else's shoes, knowing that potentially a zoning change, right, would go through if I told you that I would never sell. Knowing that zoning change would significantly increase the value of my property. Not saying that's at play here, but it very well could be. So when you're being told one thing, it very well could be Dick just wants the zoning change on his property because it'll triple in value versus what it is today. So when other people hear it, not up there, not making the decision, I have no reason to believe Terry's lying, but it could purely be dollars and cents. So I just wanted to make that point, and the potential impact that taking someone's word for it, you know, there's risks that go along with that. So my question is along the court timeline that was posted on eCourt and the February 28th next, I believe it's February 28th next conference session. I believe at that point either a decision needs to be made on new overlay zones or putting back the overlay zones. I guess a third remote option would be saying we're going to do neither and put the settlement at risk. If that timeline is correct, I'm assuming at the March meeting, the ordinance would be introduced for that decision. And before that time, any homeowners would be notified before that time?
Counsel?
Yeah, I think we just have to get back to the court in this process, and the court has been very accommodating to give us more time. So right now, that's the benchmark, the most expeditious way would be, yes, somewhere in March, if there was a direction, and we're not bound by it, but if we said to the court, look, the committee's going to consider either the overlays or something as an alternative or a settlement, whatever it is, the court's going to want that process to start at one of the March meetings. And if there was a rezoning, as the governing body has pointed out, and, that there would be personal notice to everyone within 200 feet of whichever property that's impacted. So that's what would happen.
And that's 10 days, the notice would be
Yes,
10 days before the meeting?
final hearing, not the first hearing, the first
Not the introduction, 10
Right.
days before the vote?
That's correct.
Correct. Okay.
But it
That's
would
how
be
I
listed on the agenda for introduction. That's not a public hearing, but it still would be listed on the agenda. That's something that would be put on in advance of the meeting.
Most likely in March.
Right now, the court has been great because we were supposed to, when it comes to this, we were supposed to have everything completed by the end of November. And so we've been getting additional time demonstrating that the township continues to look at alternatives and work with all the parties. So we may get additional time if that happens, or there may be some type of an announcement or a direction.
Okay.
But it would start around there at this point.
I just want to throw something out there as an option, seeing other towns doing it. It's come up in past meetings. I know part of the heated debate over the proposed overlay zones is Tompkins property, Grasso, and the open space. Those are three key components that really enraged the public, and we had a large turnout at the last meeting over that. Any consideration to just doing the overlay on the actual developed trucking depot, my apologies, and the junkyards? I believe that would be about 10 acres, at a density of 10 to 11 units per acre. That would get us at 100 units. And if the town took the leap into building its own affordable housing, I believe these overlays were going to be for senior affordable housing, that it could be a nice win for the town, especially for our seniors in town, to have the town step forward and actually build and develop that 10-acre lot as an all-senior affordable housing unit, similar to what we're seeing being done in East Hanover. I think that would ease some of the public tension for that area, and it would achieve the number of affordable units, if that were the requirement, right? It's not the market rate units that's the requirement for fair share housing. It's the number of affordable units. I believe it was around 100, and if we did the market rate, it was going to come out to be 500 total units for that. So if you went that route, you would still preserve the open space, you would not have the overlays on the Grassos and Tompkins properties, and I think that would be more welcome by the public, in my opinion. Lastly, I won't speak later if I can get this last one in. I know I've gone over 4 minutes. Possibly as a last resort, as options come up, would the committee consider putting up as a referendum for vote on 1, 2, possibly 3 different options for the public that could be voted on at the June primary, and let the public decide on what they want those options to be? At that point, you take some of the blame off of your shoulders, and it resides on the public.
That would be nice.
I thought you might like that one, right? So the public would have to live with what the public decides, right? And I don't know if the court would give us enough time to do that, but I thought that would be an option that would work out there. I did have one more comment. I know you brought up the cleanup at the truck depot and those lots. I do want to point out River Park, Pine Plaza also had cleanup, and unfortunately, those cleanups also led to those developments partly or in all part on the residential piece being pilot. So I would caution that just because there's cleanup on those lots, that it doesn't preclude it from being developed. I would say based on past practice, it only lends itself to potentially going towards pilot. So I wouldn't want to hear from the environmental issues as being a detraction point on those. So those are my comments. Thank you for letting me go over my time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug. I think Township Committee would have to confer with council, as you would know, if we want to go to a referendum on any of this thing. Well, look, we all know that we're under a great deal of pressure from the courts and our legislators on this fair share housing business. It's the talk of every community around the area. I needn't sit here and say that we're none of us on this committee are pleased with the obligations that have been put upon us, none of us. We're trying the very best, I think you know, we're trying the very best to accommodate this in any way. If there are ways to remove the overlay zones from the areas that affect your neighborhoods and your neighbors, we're looking at those options. We're exploring options. Council has given us some options. Township Committee has not had an opportunity yet to fully vet those and discuss it, so I can't sit here representing them and tell you that something has been selected. I think at our last meeting, we made a commitment to you that in advance of it, we would notify a broad range of the neighbors as best we could. Am I out of place on that, Joe? That we would go beyond what's, quote, only required of us for notification and try and keep you all involved. We'll do our very utmost to do that, knowing the sensitivity of this all. And that's where we are. Unless any other committee member has a response to Mr. Eamon's questions?
I'm going to try to just respond in general, because I think everyone's aware there's only so much we can say right now in the negotiations. To the idea of essentially breaking up one of the parcels, the only latitude potentially that I can share at this point is to break up the zones and maybe one stay in and one go out. Part of the overlay was the fact that it was going to include as they've been mapped out. And if we were to take out certain parcels, so first of all, our calculations, we wouldn't be able to have the same density. And second of all, we tried this discussion, and I can only say it this way, that we talked about it's not going to work. The most we could do is separate and perhaps get one moved and one stay there, and I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but I'm just trying to break down a little bit of the discussions to the point that Mr. Emmons made. With respect to a referendum, the problem there is, first of all, generally they happen in November, because if you do it in the primary, I don't think you can. But it's, from a legal standpoint, it's more of a policy decision right now, the governing body, because there's a settlement out there. And so if you had a binding referendum and to vote on something that would breach a settlement, and a court order would probably ensue all kinds of different difficulties or hurdles. And the seniors, the site, a portion of the site, 2/3 of it was for senior, restricted for senior. And to your point about the pilot, I think you're correct when it comes to River Park. There was a cleanup and there's a pilot. Pine Plaza, I'm not aware of as a significant cleanup, and also I think we need to be mindful Pine Plaza is, I think that was more generated towards the fact that it was all senior, much like East Hanover. But in East Hanover, that site, I think it's called the Nike site, that was deeded from the federal government, so the land is already there, and if East Hanover doesn't have a developer, they're going to have to fund the costs for that development. But that, I think that also has about, I thought it was about 100 senior units or so, but we do have the seniors at the Pine Plaza. But to break it out is something that we tried to talk about, but it gets complicated. It's almost like then we're cherry picking. It's kind of all or nothing. But we did get an option where perhaps we can move one site and not have to move the other. That's all I can say to that. And I'm not saying there's any direction, but that's one of the things. Because we need fair share housing to approve this. We need the special master to approve this. And we also need to find the appropriate suitor, and it really has to be a party that's really already part of this third round plan. It's not like we can start going outside of it, and that's just the way the settlement and the rules work, and then we need the court's approval And so there's a lot of steps involved to that point. But something like you suggested, which was a good suggestion, isn't something that, even if we wanted it, which was tried a little bit, we need everybody's approval, and the signal is we're not going to get that, is the best I can say right now.
Can I just comment back?
Doug, go ahead.
Just for my own knowledge and everyone else's knowledge here, or anyone that watches on YouTube or on Channel 21, Fair Share Housing is not a government agency, right? Their position in this is strictly to expand affordable housing throughout the state. So if I'm hearing you correctly, Fair Share Housing is now concerned with particular lots that are in a deal? That would seem to go against what their mission is of purely expanding affordable housing. So why is it of so much concern to Fair Share Housing that all of these lots that were originally proposed be included in this settlement? I can't say for certain, it's hearsay, but wide hearsay, that developers fund Fair Share Housing. So it would lead me to believe if Fair Share Housing is hunkered in on certain zones, that there is someone behind Fair Share Housing that wants those zones because their goal is to expand affordable housing. Not specific overlay zones, not specific properties, but to expand affordable housing. So if you could subdivide that lot and get 75, 60 on that lot, and you could get 50 more affordable on another lot somewhere else in town, that would fulfill Fair Share Housing's requirement. And I would say, I can't tell you what to do, you're the attorney, you're there in the courtroom, I would make that point, that we are negotiating with Fair Share Housing, whose agenda is to spread affordable housing, not handpick certain zones. And if we can give them what we agreed to on the number of units, especially when it's not an overlay, especially if it's going to be a zone that has more likely to be developed, I don't see why the court wouldn't agree with those options. I would say it's becoming more and more apparent that if Fair Share Housing is not willing to budge on these overlay zones, that there's another reason behind it. And I'd be curious to who is funding it and who's pulling the strings on the other side of Fair Share Housing that they are hunkered in on these zones. I just took it from what you said.
Well, Fred, if I
Well, I want to say,
Hunkering
No, I'm
down on
not.
these zones, I understand your terminology.
No, but I'm not.
We've been given an allocation.
yeah,
It's not as though Fair Share Housing is hunkered in on this zone or Washington Street, et cetera. We have been given an allocation. It started out at 1,000 L&M units, which have caused you nearly 5,000 total units in the market, et cetera. You know that, Doug. All right. So it's a kind of unfair. Is there a lobbying group behind Fair Share Housing? Possibly is. I don't know. I'm not down to Trenton to see who's driving that. But all I can do is try to tell you that the deal that Hanover has and the years that we worked at it with professionals who have looked at this, who've made these recommendations. These gentlemen didn't make these recommendations in a vacuum. They have reports, they have planners' recommendations, et cetera, all pointing to, Burgess Associates, all pointing to these areas to try and accommodate Fair Share, who says, locate these many houses, Hanover. That's the units. That's where we are, Fred.
well, and at this point, and I think you'll understand, I'm really not at a position where I can respond to that, because I don't want to affect
I understand.
the relationship or whatever's out there, but at some point, I think, some of those things I would very much like to answer, but this is,
One day you'll get the
there's
answer.
There's a big change since 2015 when this hit the courts. It's not like there's a whole history here, and all of the municipalities and residents are feeling this change, and there's a change in the dynamics. It's unlike any type of litigation I've been involved in, and any attorney will tell you that, because of the different aspects of the playing field. And that's about the best I can say it right now, but I understand your logic and what you're saying.
Thank you.
Mr. Eman, I have a question for you, though. And again, we're still trying to vet all this out, and a lot of stuff is coming. Would your preference be, if we were to move this, and we were to imminently, guaranteed, 500 more condos, or high density, or leave it where it is and potentially, in my opinion, a much slighter chance of being developed? Which would your preference be?
Tell me the lot. Give me a sample lot,
No, it's
hypothetically.
more the question is, there's...
You have to give me a hypothetical sample lot.
Where, you've
These
got
overlays are on residential properties and open space.
potentially...
Open space, once it's gone, it's gone.
I agree.
Property next to Bear, empty parking lot, give me the units at Bear.
I think what we're trying to get to, though,
Right.
is we're concerned, there's been a
Don't
lot of
disrupt-
concern expressed about police and schools and traffic, and we're saying that there may be the very slight chance that whatever conclusion or solution we come to may result in, as Mike said, up to 500 units being built much sooner than any of us had ever planned. And these are the sorts of things, getting back to why we don't do studies and why we don't do all these things, because we are still in flux as far as what the amount of units are going to be. Mike, I'm sorry, to Mike's question, there's the potential of that happening, and that's going to impact schools and police and all the things that the community talked about that night when everybody was here. It wasn't just about Washington Ave, it was about the community at large. And the question is, are you concerned enough about those 500 units impacting the entire community, maybe not near Washington Street, maybe some other lot somewhere else in town, or if we're able to somehow convince you that we are convinced that perhaps that overlay zone might not necessarily happen, and if it did, it wouldn't be for many years, what would your preference be?
I would, Bear property, develop our own affordable housing for the affordable housing. You don't need the market units. I understand we got the cigar box.
I agree with that. I'm saying with the two choices you've been...
And you're black or white, I'm looking for a solution that's in the middle that works for everyone. And that's what I try to do, right? So you're
Well,
trying to
that's what
pigeonhole
we're
me into
working
one solution. A lot of towns, a lot of smart towns, they are building their own affordable housing for this exact reason. For the exact reason why you're trying to get me to say we take the 500. Madison, Harding, the list is long. They are building their own affordable housing. We have done it ourselves, okay? All right? That is the most logical option. Will we have to put some money out? I know we have our cigar box budget. That is the best option as a whole. It doesn't disrupt open space. It doesn't put overlay zones on residential properties. It doesn't, let's roll the dice and hope that Dick Kitchell doesn't sell his property.
So
if we need 100
where would you
units,
suggest?
we build 100 units.
Where?
For me, I would put junkyard and the truck lot. Whatever we can get in there for senior units, that's what I would put on that lot. And if we're short 30 units, find another small little lot to put an overlay zone where we could do 30 units, and if it has to have market rate units on it, has market rates, you're gonna have two things happen. I appreciate the time to speak here. All right, so let's say you have to do 100 units. All right, that's 100 affordable on your we'll say we get 80 there, on your junkyard and the truck lot, okay, that's 80. So let's say we needed 130 total.
So we'd have to buy the junkyard and the truck lot.
Sure.
Clean it up.
Sure,
So we're
Sure.
probably in for 10 million,
sure. Sure.
okay?
Yep. I believe at your last campaign, you said you weren't afraid of debt. When you campaigned,
For the right cause. I don't
Okay.
think this,
Debt-
so
debt-
far you haven't sold me on this one.
My Lord.
I'm just saying, I've done the research, Mike. At your last
haven't sold me on
campaign, you
this
said,
one.
don't be afraid of debt, okay? Debt is cheap nowadays, okay? Very, very cheap.
Your taxes would double, Doug. And if that's what we want in the town with the lowest taxes and the best services, your taxes would double. If you're talking about buying high-density property and options to buy that property in the future, and your use, by the way, your uses are very noble. And I'd love to meet with the other mayors, including Mayor Panullo and Mayor Connolly, on the matter and find out how they've how they accomplished it with their senior housing. Did they take HUD money? Did they take federal money? Did they get grants that you, anything you touched there?
Agreed
means
on all
It's not going to
points.
be your senior housing, my friend. it's going to be senior housing for whomever can use it.
Sure.
Having said all of that, I'm
We'd
sorry,
have to buy the properties.
we would have to buy the
properties,
property at the
Build-
high-density
build the
price.
units,
In other words, if it...
and then...
You know you're
and then-
helping my argument why Dick Kitchell's going to sell.
Then we'd have to operate it.
You're actually helping my argument on why Dick Kitchell's going to sell. High-density housing, 10 million? Hang on, Dick Kitchell, all of a sudden, in a $1 million lot, he's not going to sell for 10 million? You're arguing
Probably
against
not.
yourself here.
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Oh, come on. Come on, I don't want to be rude, but seriously? You're arguing against yourself. You're telling me how much the lot would be and exactly why we can't afford it, but yet Dick Kitchell wouldn't take tenfold profit on his property overnight? That's why he'll tell you he won't sell it. I'll tell you the same thing if I knew I could sell my property for 10 times the next day. Don't be silly. Don't be silly. Very, very naive to sit here and listen that Dick Kitchell will not sell his
I don't think Dick Kitchell's property is going to go for
property.
10 million, but you're talking about buying out 3 businesses. So that's why I pulled. I estimate his property's probably worth about 6. So let's say 6.
Sure.
Government takes a third off the top. Now
Sure.
you're at 4.
Okay.
Okay? He's got 3 children in the business. He's not going to sell them out and walk away with that.
So are we buying his whole lot?
Or have to, I guess.
Okay, if we're getting his whole lot.
I don't know.
I don't know, we got to, all right, we got to,
We're so
hang
off the
on,
map.
hang on.
We're so off the map.
Hang on.
I don't know where we are.
Great open debate, but all right, if we're
Yeah.
buying his whole lot,
So-
maybe we forego the turf field and we take the $1 million out of
And now
open
it's $1 million
space
to clean it
and
up,
we
so
use
now
that
we're
to
down to
preserve
$3
the
million.
open space in the back.
He's getting $3 million to build it.
All right, so now we're down to 2 million?
We're getting into some floor
We're
arguments
down to
here.
2 million.
Gentlemen, please, out of respect to the
No problem.
people who are involved, who own this property, let us not communicate any more information as to what they may or may not do. It's an interesting conversation. I'd love to have it. I'd love to have it. I'd love to continue that, but it's unfair if they're not here to represent themselves. So let us answer questions that you have as opposed to engage in subjunctive debate, because that's where we're going here.
Agreed. I believe I won the debate, thank you. I'll be running for president and
There you go.
Congratulations.
The floor remains open. Ladies and gentlemen, go ahead.
Hello, Christopher Matisich, 32 Sunset Drive. I'm going to try to lighten the mood and share a story. Back when I was in high school, I tried walking from my friend's place over behind Whippany Park High School to Blackbrook, and I went through the woods that goes along the airport, and then I hit the Whippany River, and I couldn't get there. So we just jumped in and swam, and we came out behind PC Richards, and then we continued on, we got to the park. We were really wet, but the reason I bring this up is because I'm looking at the township circulation map, and they have a framework plan for bike trails throughout town, and I see that part of that same trail that I blazed myself was marked here going through the Black Moat Preserve and Hanover Meadows as part of the future bike path system. And I spoke with the township engineer last week about the bike trail system and the status and where we're at. And I think it'd be beneficial to put some attention to that and try to continue developing that. I've got a couple opinions, which they're just my own opinions, but I think that riding through town is kind of disjointed currently. There's a lot of sidewalks, a lot of road crossings. There's very few places where you can just get on and ride for a while. Same with dog walking. You got to cross a lot of streets and everything. That section I just described seems to be a very long, straight, continuous section, which is off the roadway, so it's safe for everyone. And I think another spot, I noticed in today's agenda, Section H, we have a 2019 trail construction grant that's focused on the Bee Meadow Park area to make the trail system around the ponds. I'm wondering if part of that funding can be applied towards the trail system that we have shown here as an off-road mixed-use path going through the same area. It crosses between Pond 1 and 2 over the corrugated metal bridge, and then extends, I think, what's up the right-of-way for the power lines to Parsippany Road and then crosses over that and comes out down here by Veterans Park. I think that would also be very important, because right now it's hard to get from the whole Troy Hills area to where we are on bike. You have to go down either Route 10 or Parsippany Road, which aren't good for biking, they don't have sidewalks, or take a long detour down Bee Meadow Parkway. And then connecting back to some of the recent stuff that was online, the Route 24 area, I see that there's a section marked on that also to be turned into a mixed-use bike path. So and I guess my question is, what can we do to get this more continuous?
Let me help, and maybe Deputy Mayor Farmos can add to this. We have a very comprehensive connectivity plan, it's called. If you go back a little bit with us, it used to be called Patriots Path. We've added to it considerably. Has bike trails. We've connected from Morris County Mall. As you probably know, we did some improvements from Morris County Mall through the river area out to Cedar Knolls Road.
Yep.
It crosses Cedar Knolls Road with that obscene bunch of barriers that we have on the bridge there, and then goes over to Jefferson. Jefferson's been totally done. As you can see, the surface has been redone for the trails and for biking, skating, etc. Goes down to Central Park, cuts through Central Park using the trail that already exists, comes out to Eden Lane. Designated trail goes up Eden Lane to MetLife, Whippany Road. MetLife, I understand, has completed portions of the trail.
Yes.
Bayer has accepted portions of the trail. So on that note, John, if you want to...
Yeah, I applaud your thoughts on the trail system. Hanover has been a big advocate of a trail system, clearly. We brought this to the attention of the county. The county, for many years, was not recognizing the desirable components that could be provided to a community of having trails. It's great for our residents. It's great for enthusiasts who want to get out and cycle. It's great for people who just want to walk. It's great for businesses, for connectivity, to allow them to go from building A to building B within the town, the major corporations. Based upon this municipality, we were able to drive an issue on the ballot that was supported by nearly 2/3 of people in Morris County.
Public question.
That public referendum ballot allowed us to tap into what's called the $55 million in money that previously could not be used for trails that were off, that were on and off-road. They were exclusively off-road trails. So what we've done is we worked very closely, engineering, Mr. Macera has worked very closely with the county parks system as well as Hanover Township's recreation department, trying to map out opportunities to expand the trails. We really want to expand the trails. It's something that we see as a real benefit and a real great amenity for our community. And I know Mr. Mahalko, he can speak to it, but he has a vision, and his vision is to enable just what you said, to be able to get on a bicycle from this parking lot almost and be able to ride safely to Bee Meadow Park, to do that connection. So with all of that said, what I suggest is, why don't we, outside of this meeting, have a discussion with Mr. Macera, and let's map out the idea, and let's then bring it forward to Recreation and have them weigh in on it, so to see if we can accomplish that. But I totally endorse the idea, and we thank you for bringing it up.
Okay.
I could say for Hanover that over the years through the planning board, we've also had a requirement that if, on some of our approvals, that if these rights-of-ways or easements can be acquired through those lands to connect it all, we wanted to take them, and we've done that. So successfully, we've met all the rights-of-ways and easements for Patriots Path through the town. We're adding to it with the connectivity trail, I understand, Bee Meadow, et cetera. But we've done an aggressive job of putting all together the lands. Now becomes the capital side. You pave it, improve it, make it happen. Some of the areas are wet, some of the areas have to be treated differently. But be assured, as part of Parks and Recreation and part of what we're doing in the environmental area is to try and get these trails in. Floor remains open. Hearing none? Seeing none? Motion to close?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Administrator?
Thank you, Mayor. The next item of business is the approval of the Township Committee minutes, the regular minutes of January 9th, 2020. We have a motion for approval.
So moved.
A motion by Mr.
Second.
Gallagher, seconded by Mr. Cahill. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
We have one letter, communication, unfortunate, losing a good staffer to the Township of Denville. And this is Kayla Wrigley, who's a resident of the township, and she's moving up to assume a full-time position with the court system in Denville. And Kayla will be leaving Hanover Township, leaving the job as of February 21st. May we have a motion to accept the letter of resignation?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
So accepted. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, as we proceed with the agenda, normally with the approval of transfer of liquor licenses, we do not have public hearings, except in the case when an objection has been filed on a transfer. And in this case, an objection had been filed by the attorney representing Pine Plaza, in that the allegation was that K.L. Marshall, formerly trading as the Melting Pot, had not paid the rent. And the objection was to see if a lien could be placed on the liquor license. As Township Attorney has provided me with counsel, the only entity that can place a lien on a liquor license is the Internal Revenue Service. And that's why this is set forth for a public hearing, to hear any objection from the attorney representing Pine Plaza. But I was informed this morning that there was I guess, an out-of-court settlement with the Melting Pot and Pine Plaza, so there is no need for a hearing at this point. However, because we've listed it, I will open it up and ask if there is any person wishing to go on record objecting to the transfer. Okay, seeing none, hearing none, we have a resolution then to approve the transfer. It's a resolution of the Township Committee approving a person-to-person transfer of pocket plenary retail consumption license number 1412-33-002-011 from K.L. Marshall LLC, formerly doing business as the Melting Pot, to Interviews Liquor 10 LLC. And we'll state for the record that Interviews LLC went through criminal history background check. We've received their certification that all taxes have been paid, and they have filed with me the necessary affidavit of publication on the transfer, which notification appeared in the daily record in accordance with law.
This one for recuse?
Yes, so you should,
Yeah, will the record show that I will recuse myself from any discussion on this particular hearing?
okay, may we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a second. We have a motion by Mr. Faramaska, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. On roll call for approval, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
Mr. Francioli is abstaining and recusing himself from the vote. So approved. Okay, as we continue, ladies and gentlemen, next item of business, we have one ordinance for public hearing and adoption. This is the ordinance dealing with the new pool membership fees for the Bee Meadow Swimming Pool and additional fees related to all of the activities and programs which are sponsored by the Township's Parks and Recreation Department. We have the proof of publication that the ordinance and the notice of introduction appeared in full in the January 15th issue of the Daily Record in accordance with law. So at this time, may we have a motion to convene the public hearing?
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Faramaska and Mr. Gallagher. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska. Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Is there anyone in chambers wishing to be heard concerning ordinance number 1-2020?
Motion to close?
Seeing none, hearing none, we
Second.
have a motion to close by Mr. Francioli, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Now, on adoption, be it resolved that an ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover, amending and supplementing Section 125-4, entitled Recreation Department Fees, under Chapter 125 of the Code of the Township, entitled Fees, with the inclusion of new resident and non-resident pool membership fees for the year 2020 Bee Meadow Swimming Pool season, and new fees related to various recreation and park administration department programs and activities, be adopted on second reading, and that a notice of the adoption be published in the Daily Record in accordance with law. May we now have a motion on adoption?
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Gallagher.
Second.
Second by Mr. Mahalko. On roll call for adoption of ordinance 1-2020. Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Faramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Aye.
And Mr. Francioli.
Aye.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, we move on now to ordinances for introduction as a consent agenda. So they're listed at the bottom of page 1, starting with ordinance 2-2020 through ordinance number 10-2020. And we have one additional ordinance that was discussed during the open public session dealing with the open space tax, and that does not appear on the agenda for obvious reasons because it had not been discussed. But for the benefit of the public, this ordinance is docketed as ordinance 11-2020, and it is an ordinance of the Township Committee of the Township of Hanover that would reduce the 2 cents per $100 of assessed valuation dedicated open space trust fund tax rate to 1.5 cents per $100 of assessed valuation during calendar year 2020 only, and further authorizing the Township's Chief Municipal Finance Officer to collect the 1.5 cent dedicated tax. This is a continuation of the 1.5 cent that's been collected last year, and was discussed, as I said, during the open public session of the conference work session. So we now take as a consent agenda ordinances 2 through 11-2020 as a consent agenda. All these ordinances will be considered for public hearing and final passage at the March 12th Township Committee meeting at 8 p.m. here in the main meeting room, and any person wishing to be heard to give comment on any of the ordinances will be given the opportunity to do so. All of the ordinances will be published in full in the Daily Record in accordance with law. However, I'll point out to you with regard to ordinance numbers 7, and also 8. Those two land use ordinances are more than 6 pages in statement, and the municipal land use law states that we can publish summaries of those two ordinances. So all of the ordinances will be published in full, with the exception of summaries on ordinances 7 and 8, which is permitted by the municipal land use law. Once again, public hearing will be held at 8 p.m. here in the main meeting room on the 12th of March for any person wishing to be heard concerning any of the ordinances. So at this time, may we have a motion to introduce all of the ordinances as a consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Faramaska, seconded by Mr. Francioli. On roll call for the introduction of ordinances 2 through 11. Mr. Gallagher?
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska?
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko?
Yes.
Mr. Cahill?
Yes.
And Mr. Franciulli.
Aye.
So introduced. We continue, ladies and gentlemen, with the resolutions as a consent agenda, starting at the bottom of page 3, all the way to page 6. Are there any questions by members of the governing body concerning any of the resolutions?
I'll move that they're moved.
Second?
We have a motion by Mr. Ferramaska to approve the resolutions as the consent agenda, and we have a second by Mr. Gallagher. On roll call for the approval of the resolutions as a consent agenda, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
Mr. Franciulli.
Aye.
So approved. Ladies and gentlemen, as we continue, at the bottom of page 6, we have payment of bills. $8,588,348.39. May we have a motion to
So
pay our
moved.
bills? We have a
Second.
motion by Mr. Franciulli, seconded by Mr. Cahill. On roll call, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Aye.
And Mr. Franciulli.
Aye.
So approved on the payment of bills. As we continue, the bottom of page 6 to the top of page 7, we have all of our raffle applications, which we also will take as a consent agenda. Are there any questions about any of the raffle and bingo applications?
Motion to approve the
A
raffle.
motion by
Second?
Mr. Ferramaska, seconded by Mr. Gallagher. On roll call to approve the raffle and bingo applications, Mr. Gallagher.
Aye.
Mr. Ferramaska.
Aye.
Mr. Mahalko.
Yes.
Mr. Cahill.
Yes.
And Mr. Franciulli.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Township Committee, that clears the agenda of the Business Administrator, Township Clerk, and I thank you.
Thank you, Joe, appreciate it. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, once again, at this point in the meeting, I'd like to reopen. So gentlemen, a motion to open the meeting to the
So
public?
moved.
Second?
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, the floor is open. If you'd like to address the Township Committee, please do so from the podium, giving us your name and address for the record.
Hi, Linda Oaks, 39 Courtright Road, Whippany. How are you guys tonight? So I have a problem that actually, Mayor, you and I talked about like 2 years ago with my utility wires in front of my house being under 13 feet, specifically the communications line. Talked to you about it. You were kind enough to have the engineer out. The engineer had all the
Yeah, I remember,
utilities out
yeah.
the next day.
Yeah,
Guess what happened?
the wires were hit.
Nothing. The wires are still low. They're even
Oh,
lower now than they were.
All right.
I can't get any deliveries in my driveway, and my husband is like seriously ready to have a cow. So I came tonight because he's angry. Who can we call? Who can help us? What can we do? Because
You know,
this has
I'm gonna
been
tell-
going
I'm
on
gonna
since
tell
we
you,
moved here 6 years
Right now,
ago.
from this new list that we're about to put out
Right.
on whom to call for various...
Well, I've called all of them, and I even called the
You know,
police when I moved
we
in.
also, the
Yeah.
municipality reached out, and I also had our town clerk from emergency management take a
Right.
look at that wire.
They're
There was
below the
comment at
13
that
feet.
time but in any event, that would be, was that First Energy or JCP&L on the
It's the
wires?
communications lines. It's not the electric or anything. It's the bottom rung, so it's all the
Is it the cable
communications
company?
companies.
Is it cable?
It's cable, Verizon, whoever else is in that bottom rung of wires.
I'm gonna, you know what I'm gonna do, Lynn? I'm gonna make you a copy of this list.
Okay.
And I'm gonna give it to you. And if you don't get any satisfaction, you're gonna get back to us, and then one of us is gonna make a call.
That would be great, because
yeah.
can't get
Yeah.
anything delivered
I
without
apologize.
an
I
extra
didn't realize
fee.
this thing has been going on all this time. Did you
6
finish
years,
the-
we had to have our movers move us from the street because they couldn't get into our driveway when we moved in.
Finish the kitchen?
No,
Oh.
the rest of the house,
Because
not
of
the
the wire?
kitchen.
No. All right. We're going to make, Joe's going to make a copy of this at some point. He's going to give it to you.
Okay,
All right.
thank
Before the
you.
end of the meeting, we'll have it for
I would
you.
appreciate it, because it's just getting ridiculous. So, thank you. And I appreciate your help 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago with it as well, so.
I just wish it was more successful.
You and me both. Just a couple quick comments on the overlay. I think everybody had some great points. But why can't we overlay, I mean, just from listening, why can't we overlay over the Morris County Mall in the woods? Why can't we overlay over defunct car dealerships?
Can we overlay it on the Red Roof Inn?
And economy hotels that have 1,000 police calls a minute? Like, I think that there's a lot of, like, think out of the box, and I'm sure there's rules and regulations as to why or why not, but I think that we should look at repaving parking lots and not repaving trees. And I just also, you know, I think it's great that we're putting in bike paths and doing stuff like that, and, you know, even with children, I think, you know, turf fields are only really just limiting to a certain amount of people in town, so I'd much rather see some space go to open space where it's free woods and stuff like that, so, you know, and I guess my only other concern with the pond property, right, is that the idea is that nobody would sell. And, you know, we have some private families that own lots that they definitely have expressed they don't want to sell. And you guys have no interest in taking it in any way, shape, or form. But fast forward 5 years from now. What happens if there's different faces up here, or it's a different time, or there's different pressures from the court? Now you've put this overlay in, and now, like, now you're being pressured to eminent domain, or do something else, or condemn, or do something else to these people's property that you never had the intention of doing, and that's why it was the perfect spot. Like, I just wonder how far down the path you've really thought it out. So those are just my 2 cents on it, and like, I think it's all been debated and whatever, so we don't need to go back and forth, but I just wanted to put that out there as additional food for thought.
I'll let counsel answer your question, but I would tell you, there isn't a square inch of Hanover Township, in my opinion, and I have not been privy to a lot of the study work that's been handled by my colleagues, that hasn't been examined for best use to satisfy this fair share. But Fred, on that question.
Yeah, no, we continue to look at all of these suggestions. That's what we've done. And, you know, like, an example, the hotel was sold, and that's, in this process, that makes it less attractive to an overlay zone, because now they've just completed a transaction, because that certainly would be high on the list, and it was discussed. And that doesn't mean that's going to be a one-for-one type trade-off, but something like that was discussed even early on, and then again, as we revisited this issue. But it's hurdles like that, but rest assured, I understand your point.
There's plenty of, you know, empty buildings in town. So, you know, you have that whole Mondelez property on Route 10 that could fit in a lot of nice, you know, condos and be part of, like, the whole, like, Route 10 exciting town center. So there's all sorts of other things. So I just wanted to, you know, say that I also agree that we need to keep trees. But thank you guys for everything. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Lynn. Floor remains open.
Promise, I wasn't going to say anything.
Doug, it's your second shot at the mic.
Questions. I got work to do after this, so I didn't want to be here too long. Mr. Giorgio, just a question. Current municipal bond rate for AAA, no debt township.
I might tell you, we're not rated. We'd have to buy a rating, but go ahead.
Sure. No debt. I'm presuming, making a presumption here, that would be AAA rated.
At least.
We consider ourselves AAA rating because we don't have any debt.
We don't have any debt.
Exactly.
Good question, Doug.
Fair presumption. What's the current municipal bond rate, AAA? I just did a quick look.
We don't look at the bond ratings. 2 and 3/4,
2 something?
Doug, we would be guessing.
I think it's 2 something. I saw
I'm
Union
saying
Township,
2.5,
Municipal. I can't imagine Union
Yeah.
Township's upstanding like us, AAA, or would be AAA. They were in the 3s. So, Mike, you mentioned the $6 million sales price, get a kick in from the state, some HUD money. We get it down to $4 million. I just want to stick to the facts here. No scare tactics there. Taxes would double. 30-year municipal bond rate, 2.7 yield, monthly payment, $16,223.90 a month. It's $194,686 a year, 5,000, estimating, if I remember right, about 5,000 units paying taxes in town. It's $38.80 per year in taxes. Nowhere near double, not that big of a hit. It's a very doable project, building it ourselves. It is not a huge financial hit. It would be a win for the town. It would be a win for the seniors in the town. It's something I strongly encourage you to look at. Do not be scared off by the numbers. I just ran it myself. You can
What if
check
we-
the numbers.
Well, I don't doubt your numbers, you're a very intelligent man. That buys the property, but what if we bought the property and put it into our open space?
What was that?
What if we bought the property and put it into open space? I'd rather not develop it.
Well, you have an already developed junkyard and lot, right?
Then we'd also
So-
have to get the...
Well, yeah, I don't want to get into that debate. I had brought up, I would not develop that entire lot, I agree, right? I had mentioned taking the money out of the open space fund, and instead of using some of that money to supplement it, to save the taxpayers' money, hey, we'll forego a turf field, but we could preserve that back half of that property as open space. Chris talked about an outstanding trail system. John, you mentioned it, outstanding trail system. The residents love it. It would make a phenomenal trail system back there to be able to preserve that back half of Dick Kitchell's property. I would even recommend that we call it Francioli Woods, if I can get some buy-in here, all right? We can get a nice plaque at the end of Wilson Way. I'll buy the sign for you, Mayor.
I think they're going to name
All
a
right.
fire hydrant after me, but that's...
No. I'll buy the sign and I'll get your name on it, okay? I'm trying to get some
Well, then I
brownie
might go
points
for it,
here.
Doug.
Work with me, okay? But if you take that money out and you put it towards it, it is a doable project. Roll the sleeves up. I just gave you the numbers. It is a very doable project. Where there is a will, there is a way. This would be a win for the town. You would have a majority of the residents on your side. And since I've been involved, I can't say that's been the case. It would be a very, very nice win for you.
The use of bonding philosophically over Hanover's 300 years or so has not been attractive. We have no bonded debt, we have no debt. On that reason, we don't have a bond rating. Is that a good thing? In some areas, yes. Did we do short-term notes to do some improvements in this town? Yes, including this building, which was $7 million when we did the improvement in the mid-'70s, 76, 77. So we're not adverse to looking at tools of funding. Let me couch it that way. You know, if we were to form a housing authority, and by the way, I strongly recommend that. As a matter of fact, had some programs that I'd like to share with this township committee in future weeks regarding that. And it required short-term funding for construction. That's a good investment, okay? Bonding for anything that's short-term, not a good investment. That's my position. It may not be shared by my colleagues, but that's where I'm standing.
I agree. I've been debt-free my whole life, except for, probably as most of us, a mortgage. Worked since I've had a paper route, paid off school debt from the day I graduated. I'm not a believer in debt. Totally get it. I do my own cigar box budgeting. Nowadays, debt is so cheap, I opted to have a mortgage rather than not have it. I can make more money elsewhere and have my mortgage, right? Why not take out a car loan at 0% interest? Debt is not a bad thing. I will make the additional point on this. If we were to build it as all senior and not have the market rate, you also have to factor in the additional savings from not having students from those market rate units, right? So there is a other cost savings aspect of having this debt. Debt 30 years ago, 40 years ago, municipal debt, 10%, right? Higher in the 80s, significantly higher. 2% debt, a 2% interest rate on a municipal bond rating is nothing. You're talking $16,000 a month, principal and interest.
Turn to that camera and say that again.
What?
About debt for Hanover.
No problem. Hey, I have no problem. I'll campaign on this, all right? So we'll see what happens.
You know I'm being facetious. Fred, there's a,
I mean, would fair share even...
Well, you know, I think a couple things about this, and there are towns that have undertaken their own, you know, affordable housing programs, and Harding is one of them. Harding's obligation and their town is significantly different. They still have some projects that they're wrestling with. I think in this scenario, though, one thing I would ask is, and I understand the format, but So if we, this is about 10% of our entire obligation, if you take a look at it. So if we're this far along, there's a part of me that thinks, wouldn't we just want to finish this by, if we can put these units somewhere in, that they don't have somewhat of remoteness, and I'm not saying on this site, even another site, or even a site that's already, has some development, we avoid that, because Doug, if we rezone this property, to your point, it's going to be worth a lot more. If we don't rezone the property, both of these overlays, they're worth less, and they're more affordable for open space and preservation. That's sort of the vicious circle to this. So there's sort of a, and I hear your thought is, if we do the overlay and then we buy these, which is something that's been discussed about first refusal and things of that nature, but if we do that and we do the overlay, we are, to your point, double or tripling the value, and then we're going to have to pay for it.
Which is why I would recommend amending the overlay only to the developed portion of the truck lot, right?
Yeah, but fair share. But I understand your point.
If I can make one more point,
but
right? So on the total annual cost of the debt, this is not just interest, so it's not just the service on the debt, but the principal repayment, $195,000. I'm rounding this on a 2.7% on a $4 million loan. All right? You take out those market rate units, and I'm being low here. I'm using the town's number of I'll say 0.07 per unit on the market rates. That's 25 students. We know it costs about $15,000 per student, all right? A cost. So if you take 15,000 times the 25 students, I'm rounding down, it would be 28 students, but make my math easier here for me. So you have 25 students at 15,000. That comes out to be a $375,000 annual cost to support the students from the market rate units, if we let that go through. Our debt is only $195,000. By developing just the senior affordable housing units, we have saved $180,000 for the town. Does it make sense in this case for debt? Yes, it makes sense in this case for debt. For the whole public, turn on channel 21 in YouTube.
There you go.
Debt makes sense in this case. Mike, you campaigned on it in your last campaign. Debt makes sense in certain cases. I just proved the case that debt makes sense in this case.
I'd ask the prosecutor to go back and reevaluate some of his numbers in terms of the cost associated with the incremental cost for education. Are you assuming that all of that's incremental cost, or are you going to assume that some of that cost is not? Okay, so therefore we need to reassess whether our numbers are correct. Thank you.
Fair point, Mr. Furlong.
Thank you, Doug. It's been an
Let's
interesting...
call it a break even and a win-win.
We're going to neutral corners. The floor remains open. Anyone else like to address the Township Committee at this time? This is your opportunity.
Hi, Terry Baird, 180 Parsippany Road in the Whippany section of Hanover. I have some different concerns in reference to the potential overlay zones returning, because the overlay zones were on both sides of me, and because they become overlay zones, I would anticipate that if they are not developed within a certain period of time, that the state would come in, affordable housing, whatever, in the 2025, would come in and say, well, why haven't you, pursued this? And very likely, the Township Committee or the Planning Board could start the process of an area in need of redevelopment, with or without condemnation, like they did with Pine Plaza. And therefore, I would be like Nico's, because my property bordered on both sides of that, those overlay zones. So thereby, the virtue of being next door, my property could be included in that area in need of redevelopment. Am I wrong in that assumption? That potentially could happen?
I don't see how the state could come in and do anything. And as far as any property being for a study in the future, that could happen for any property. In that aspect, I actually think, just in a vacuum, there's some advantage of having it part of a plan and an overlay, because you really can't go back in and start rezoning a property that's part of an affordable housing plan without going through the gyrations we're trying to go through now. There's actually certain, so to speak, protections from any change. One of the things that we talked about even with some of the landowners is, we also said that we would have, there's no condemnation, and there was never any condemnation, and that we were looking at ways, if it were ever to proceed, to put that right in the ordinance. The ordinance, not just the, verbal, that there's no condemnation. There's nothing that the township would have to do beyond the rezoning. So to your point, could the state come in or the town go in and change it? If the town came in to change the density or the zoning, it would have to go back and it would still have to get that approval from Fair Share Housing in the court. In other words, it has to be left alone, the way
Right.
that settlement would work.
But if
it
there's a
come-
larger potential for that to be developed, then Fair Share Housing is going to be champing at the bit to get that affordable housing piece in my opinion. I mean,
But there would be an agreement, Terry, such like, for one of the zones, it's 20% senior. That is not very desirable for a developer, because it's all senior. There's, they're going to be, 20% are going to be set aside, so you don't have those market units. So, to say that somehow that would be, the town would not be legally obligated to do anything more, to say, hey, how about a higher density? But we're locked in. If it were to happen that way, we're locked in. We can't, just as much as Fair Share saying, you can't change zones without some give or take, the township has the same right to say, no, we don't have to do anything more than what we promised in that agreement, and that's rezone the property, so we wouldn't have to. You will always have the risk, any property owner, that at a future round, something else can happen. Whether you're in or not, I think the brunt of all this, for so many reasons, is going to be behind many municipalities, so I understand your concern. But I do think with that issue, I've given that a lot of thought, that, there's a certain amount of boundaries that are established if it were there. And one is not to say the township could just go ahead and rezone the property without, or could Fair Share.
Yeah,
So that's an advantage.
It's very uncomfortable from my standpoint of being the property owner in between, because my property is listed on the vacant land list as a yes. Okay, so that alone is rather problematic in my mind. And when you come to like all these other things, when you're going to be doing these affordable housing things, I mean, in East Hanover, they're even giving veterans first choice in places.
Well, that's in the law, and that's actually already, that was already discussed during the negotiations, and I wasn't aware necessarily East Hanover, but one of the things we went back and confirmed with River Park is that there was going to be a 90-day preference for veterans, and that's what the maximum the law provides, that they would have an opportunity to obtain those units, and then by law, you can't hold them anymore.
You can't hold them.
But that we already, I think I just followed up on that about in the last week to make sure that they were going to do that, and they confirmed with me that they were. At the Pine Plaza, I can't say that that was discussed, but that's a different type of, project. But for River Park, I think that was something that was discussed, and I received confirmation on that, and I can confirm that, because the governing body, we had talked about that, and I don't know if it made its way necessarily in the agreement, but the law provides for it, and River Park confirmed they would do that, so I'm glad you actually raised that. That's
Okay. Also, I need to clarify something that the mayor said in reference to a particular developer trying to buy all of our properties. It has been one particular developer. that has, not many developers.
Terry, it could be.
It's been,
But
I'm
for
just,
whatever the issue is, and I understand it, believe me, I'm a big boy. This developer has been doing a lot of work in this town. We all know it. Been doing a lot, and by the way, in defense of him, pretty quality stuff. That aside, he made offers to a lot of properties that come up for sale. Other developers do the same. I can name a lot of them, Blanchard, et cetera. So it may very well be that the offer to the Pioneer property came from Mr. Forgione, okay? I'm confident that it might have.
It did.
That's what he does.
yeah,
That's what-
to all of us.
That's what
To all of us,
well, then-
underneath that overlay zone, and myself, we have all been approached by the same particular developer.
But if you're not accepting his offer, you're not selling your property.
But it seems ironic that you're putting the overlay zone in the
You're
area
trying to connect
that,
the overlay zones to this developer? Let's be blunt. Is that what you're trying to do?
I'm not saying that, but as
Yes, you
with a
are.
homeowner in
Yes, you are.
between, it's rather upsetting when you keep seeing this same name and,
Maybe I could just say a couple quick points on that. We did meet with the property owners, and Mayor, they all indicated that they had been approached, maybe it was years ago, by, I think, they didn't say names, but I believe it was by that particular developer to buy the property.
Yes.
11 years ago.
But they did
That's what he
confirm
does.
that,
11
and
years
that's,
ago.
and that's what I think is, raised a concern. And then there's two other things. One is, I assure you, though, Terry, that nowhere in this agreement, had it, if it were, or had it gone forward with those overlays, was there ever a discussion with that developer, or was there an opportunity for condemnation? There's no provision. There was for the Midas, for a certain, very specific reason, but that didn't even come to fruition, because we thought the Midas might be part of, it just was, but there's no other condemnation that was proposed or obligated from that standpoint. And in our discussions regarding the Pine Plaza property, I think Mr. Giorgio asked him point blank, not that that means anything, because the point is everything could change tomorrow, but there's no condemnation, and yet the property owners did indicate to us at the meeting that it was sort of unnerving that years ago they were approached. But at this point, we don't have anything, and there's been no discussions, no developer. Even the court asked me this, had any developer approached us, because the court's concern was, if there was a developer that approached, are we going to get in the way now of certain people's potential rights that may have come forward? And we represented no one
okay,
has approached.
I have one slight correction. Okay, when you're saying 11 years ago, it wasn't 11 years
Well,
ago.
that's what Mr. Kitchell told me.
Maybe his was 11 years ago.
Well, that's
But
what we were...
somebody's was this past fall, as well as his neighbor this past fall. And, I mean, I still even have, I even brought it with me tonight, I still have my contract that's signed by him.
And when was that?
Mine was
years ago.
made
Put it on
right after my son died, and so I guess he thought that he could, get my property, because I was at a low point in my life at the time. So, yeah, mine was in December of 2011. But I had put him off the 2 weeks after my son died, in June, till that time, before I met with him, okay? So that's why I feel as though that this is rather discerning and upsetting to me that this same developer has been to my two neighbors to the north of me this past year, this fall of 2019, okay? Not years and years ago, okay? And ironically, these overlay zones are in the same places. For land that was supposedly said was pretty crappy, and anytime the planning board, when I go to see the planning board, anytime of these area need of redevelopment plans and stuff like that come up, they keep saying things like their hands are tied behind their backs, that they can't do anything, and they just pass it through without discussion, in the meetings anyway. And then I sit through EDAC, one of the members keeps saying, well, we'll just take it. We'll just take that property.
We'll just
So when you
take-
go to these meetings and you hear
This
that,
conversation is, that,
It
Terry,
makes-
you're-
it makes
you're
it very
making-
upsetting.
You're making a great deal of accusations, I might add, right here. I understand that you're not supportive of growth and development. That's a broad statement, okay? I appreciate that. I think that this township committee has done a yeoman job, and committees before us, in good balance in Hanover Township. Let's talk to the issues, okay? Our park systems are the best, 950-odd acres of open space, another 60, 70 acres that we're trying to add with the Route 24 right-of-way, trail systems that we're putting in, monies that we're throwing into recreation for our youngsters who well deserve it, et cetera. We're doing all the right things, and we're keeping our taxes the lowest in Morris County. We have no debt. We are looked at as a model in the county, if not the state. I don't know what else any of us up here
it's not that I
can
have
say to
a
you,
problem with, it's
other
smart
than,
development.
You know, I use the expression with Len Ferriello fondly, and Len knows it, when he sat on here, that there wasn't anything that he would prove that had a stick on it. He wanted dirt roads and teepees, was my expression, and that's the way he wanted Hanover to stay. Listen, shortly they're going to get rid of me, okay? I don't stand in the way of anything that they want to do here as far as development is concerned. I take a lot of the shots for it, I granted. But I'm very proud of, over the years, where we've evolved for Hanover Township, still very proud of it, and that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
I can understand what you're saying, but please try to understand my situation. I am in the sandwich in between these two potential overlay zones, and I can become a Section 3, and it just seems that this same name keeps coming up, and the overlay zones wind up in the same spot. It's just like, it's very upsetting.
No one here, and no one that we've been involved with from a private sector has created, designed, recommended those zones. They were recommended by a professional planning firm, Joe Burgess. You've probably got the reports. You've opened about everything that we've got. You've probably got those reports. Those are the recommendations. We follow the direction of the professionals. We try to listen to our community, and if we have issues with what the professionals saying, we challenge it. But this is where we are. And it has nothing to do with Mr. Forgione buying overlay zones or not, and nothing at all to do with that. And that's where you're trying to go with this thing. You know, you have a very short memory, but now that we're openly discussing this thing, you don't remember too long ago when your dad was alive and Mr. Ferriello was looking to condemn your property for open space. Do you remember?
My father wasn't going to condemn it, he was going to...
You came forward to this township committee.
To purchase it, yep.
You came forward to the township committee and you pleaded
Yep.
for us to back the hell off.
Yep.
You know what this mayor said at that time? Yes, we'll back the hell off. It's not for us to do. But, you know, nobody is after your property for condemnation. Again, I refer to the fact that we've got a lot of professional input that led us to this point. We've got legal counsel who has guided us for years to this point. And these are the recommendations. Can we find other alternatives for you? We're not turning a deaf ear to that. We've got 3 options on the board that this township committee will be looking at. Now, I don't know what the results of that will be. We haven't had discussions yet. But please, because this one individual develops in this town, and that's his business, okay? Buy properties, come into the township, looking at the zoning that we have and see what he can put into those zones, et cetera. You're condemning him as this, you're condemning him in your comments that he has some overbearing influence on planning and zoning in this town. He does not. He does not. That's my opinion.
It's just that his name comes up all around me, and it's scary, because, like, you said...
What would you
that
like to
can-
say?
I would like to have assurances
Would you
that
like
the
to have-
properties will not be
Are you
condemned.
proposing something where this developer is concerned?
But that,
Would you
Mayor,
like us-
that we have tried to address, that the settlement, and as well as, if in fact there ever was an ordinance brought back, it would have, there'd be no condemnation to effectuate this ordinance. And the other thing is, Terry, to your concern is, these overlays were chosen, you know, as the mayor said, with the planner going through all the open space. And part of the attractiveness was high-tension wires, wetlands, existing non-conforming use that would be very difficult to sort of untangle and clean up overnight. So the prospect was, if we put a 20% set aside and just senior housing, it's not that attractive to even the developer you mentioned, because if somebody else was involved, a developer was guiding us, they would have wanted us or pressed us for concessions and things like that. And this was done strictly because we thought it was more remote. We're hearing that there's concerns that maybe it's not as remote as everybody feels, or there's some uncertainty, so the committee went back and said, let's see what we can do. But I can tell you that, and hopefully it helps you understand and feel better, is that when it came up, Blaise Blanchard had listed for the committee so many properties, and the committee didn't want a property that you could just snap your fingers and develop, because that's the first part of the plan that we had to address. These were overlays, and we hoped it was either way far from now or a remote chance. So you may think it's not as remote, and we've heard a lot of comments of concern that it may not be as remote, so the committee's looking. But I can at least tell you one thing, that there wasn't any particular developer on the overlays that contacted myself or Mr. Branchow and said, any of them, none of them, even the existing ones that we're having to work out agreements with, that said, I have my eyes on this property. Because if that were the case, I know I would have said to the committee, well, here's one maybe we really don't want to look at this point in time. Just to try to address that one issue, and there is no condemnation that would be afforded in this agreement. And if a developer came in and said, I can't really make this work without a pilot, no obligation to do so. I can't make this work without condemning access, a different way. We could sit here and say we're compliant as a municipality. Can't say that if they're the first part of the plan, the Pine Plazas, but you can say it for the overlays. Now, I still understand that there's some concern about it could still happen, so that's why the committee's looking. But I want to let you know that no time did anybody say to us, we looked at, you know how Blaise works. He looked at every property there was and ran reports and went into detail about, and it looked a little bit attractive because of the shortcomings, that this probably won't happen overnight because it's only going to fit a very certain way with high-tension wires, and setbacks, and wetlands. But that being said, there's a real full-court press to see if it could be somewhere else.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Terry, I'm sorry, while you're up there, can I just ask a really quick question? It's only because when you were last up there, you kind of caught me by surprise with something you said, and I didn't capture it in my notes. Your discussion with Mr. Kitchell, where he said to you that he wants to sell, when and where did that occur?
The date that you introduced that ordinance.
Okay.
And you could print it online. Okay, I printed it out, and I drove it down to his office, and I went into his office, and he made a copy of it. And we had the discussion while he was making the copy.
Very good, thank you. Like I said, I just wanted to get that in my notes.
Terry, one other point of clarification. EDAC, the Economic Development Advisory Council, is an advisory group. They have no power to take anybody's property. They don't have a vote in terms of the fair share housing plan that the Township Committee, Mr. Gallagher and I represented the subcommittee for this Township Committee for nearly 2 years, looking at every available option with one goal, trying to provide Hanover Township with the best possible solution, given the cards that we've been dealt. EDAC doesn't get a vote in that. What EDAC does do, though, is they make recommendations to this committee. They're anticipating that there's going to be an influx in population in Hanover Township as a result of this, and they're trying to advance thoughts and recommendations to the Township Committee to preserve the quality of life which we have. So they're thinking about things like that, but I can assure you, they cannot take anybody's property. They cannot do that because they're an advisory group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let me piggyback something Committeeman Cahill brought up. The moment that our report was ready on fair share housing and including these templates, I don't think that report was out 24 hours when my phone rang, okay? And the party on the other end, Mr. Kitchell said, why are you condemning my land? That's what he said to me. And he was told outright by yours truly that that was never the intent and that isn't the intent and what his options were. So to respond to that innuendo, that's the answer where it started from here. Thank you, Terry. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for bearing with all this. The floor remains open. Hearing none? Seeing none? Linda, did you get your list?
I did, but there's no communications companies on here, it's the communications line. So I'll have to follow up with whether you further.
Linda, I'll talk to you after the meeting.
We'll see if we can get you some more information.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Frustrating. Got to see when we have to change a telephone pole. I got to wait for 3 utilities to come in and decide when they want to do it. All right, gentlemen, motion to close?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, at this juncture, gentlemen, comments from Township Committee.
Thanks, Ron.
Keith, go ahead.
Okay. I've received several calls lately about the emerald ash borer and how to treat the emerald ash borer. And I'm in the business, so I have to be careful, but I do not remove trees, so I'm kind of safe to advise. If you have ash trees now that are dying, they're done. We heard for a very long time the emerald ash borer is coming, the emerald ash borer is coming. It's been here for a long time. We've been taking them down for 2.5 years now. If somebody tries to sell you a treatment, although they can't, insist they give you some type of guarantee or a percentage of what they can guarantee. Because if they're treating them now, it's done. They're just making money. And when they start dying, and we're going to see in the spring that there's a lot of trees with no leaves, they start dropping material. And it takes 8 pounds of pressure to break a collarbone. So a decent-sized twig, stick, or limb that comes down can really hurt somebody or damage something. We spent a lot of money doing a solid inventory on our municipal properties and our parks and our right-of-ways around town, and we budgeted money to take down 130 ash trees. So if you do have ash trees and you're concerned and you want a professional opinion, there's a lot of great tree companies out here. But make sure they're licensed, make sure they're fully insured. If you do get an estimate, get it in writing. Don't pay with cash, pay with a check so you have a record of the transaction. And the best way in a small town to get a company is to get references. Because everybody knows who's good and everybody knows who's not. So be careful. And it doesn't hurt to get more than one price. So ash trees this spring is going to be a big deal because people are going to go outside and say, ooh, that tree has no leaves on it. 9 times out of 10 it's an ash and it's done. So Chris, you're one of the people that reached out to me, so I'm glad you're here tonight. A couple other things that are very, very important to me and our families is the New Jersey League of Municipalities featured this month, February, the New Jersey Coalition for Education and Positive Choices. And I'm glad Officer Prock is here because he's been helping us, he's part of us, as is many people in Hanover Township PD. The article was written by Carol Giorgio, and Joe's not here to hear me mention Carol Giorgio. She's a beautiful writer and a dear friend. And also it was edited by Robin Dente, who's an incredible writer and a great editor.
A great job.
So we have too many people in Hanover Township to list. We now have 20 towns and cities. We have 19 police chiefs with us. And I'm going to tell you something very interesting. I went to a seminar on Tuesday night. And I thought I was starting to learn a little bit about this because people do think I know what I'm talking about, and I don't. But they listed 24 products and devices. I wrote down all 24 on my phone. And do you know how many of that 24 I knew what they were? 3. The guy said, how many you people have no idea what I just said? and nobody raised their hand, I'm kind of embarrassed, but I don't make believe I know very much, to be honest with you. But he said, you know why you don't know what these products are? Because you're over 25 years old. The children have their own language today, and you're not supposed to know what they're talking about. So I spoke to Mike Cochran, who's the Director of Public Safety in Morristown. Morristown's a big part of our coalition. He was the former Deputy Chief of West Orange PD. When I told him, he said, send me that list. I'll get you information on every single one of those items. We'll share them on all our social media accounts and our website, and we'll make sure our families know what these are and they can start to understand this language. So my point being, we have a lot of work to do, and we're doing it, but the best sentence of the whole night of that presentation, besides the fact that I think learning is stimulating at my age, he said we have to come up with a better way to transfer this information to our families because there's only 50 people in this room. That's the whole thing the New Jersey Coalition does, is shares information through the vehicles that we have in our hands all day long. So if you haven't checked out our website yet, or any of our events, check us out.
Is it up?
Oh, the website's up. We have a big drug summit at the Jets training facility at the end of March, and it's going to be for civic leaders, sports coaches, and we have some beautiful people, including Orange County Chopper working with us. But the big event, week 7 of Friday Nights at Men Arena is coming up, but our big event is February 28th, Law Enforcement Night. And yes, Hanover Township is right in the middle of all of it. So if you want to come meet some of our heroes and see many police departments from around this area, get pictures taken with them, wear some of the equipment, please come. Men in Arena, Friday night, February 28th. Joe, you missed it. I thanked Carol for her great writing on the League of Municipalities article, and you took off right at that point. But the only other thing I want to say is we worked very, very hard on our budget this year, and I want to thank Silvio Esposito. Last year, all his great work, we actually didn't see him at the end of the session, and we left without thanking him and saying goodbye. So Silvio, I want to publicly thank you for your great work. We take credit for the low increase, but all we do is drive Silvio nuts for 2 or 3 weeks. Then we have him back there all Saturday. So Silvio, thank you, great work.
Thank you.
And hopefully everything goes well with it. That's it for me, guys, thank you.
Very good, thank you, Ace. Very good. Brian, Community Cahill.
Great, thank you, Mayor. So I'll be brief. I just want a couple of things. First, I wanted to start with Hanover Township. You may have read in the paper, they did on Monday, an accreditation team from the New Jersey State Association of Police Chiefs came to the department on February 10th to verify that the department meets the association's best practices standards. So it's an in-depth, all-day type of thing. It requires that they meet best practice standards involving administration, personnel, operations, investigative, as well as detainee functions. So it's pretty thorough. In addition to that, they also took comments from employees of the department and the municipality itself, as well as comments from the public. So from everything I've been hearing, it went pretty well, although we won't have any official word on the results until about March or so. Moving on, a couple of important events going on Saturday, depending on where you live. The fire district elections are coming up. So Whippany Fire District 2, a couple of things going on there. We have 2 candidates vying for one open commission seat. The first person is Robert Cobain Jr., and the other individual is Rich Olaco, again, vying for one seat. The district's budget proposes to adjust the tax rate from .067 to .072 per $100, which raises it to a little bit over $1.8 million. Voting will take place at the Fire Commission building, which is right next to the firehouse, and that begins at 2 p.m. on Saturday, ending at 9 p.m. in the evening. Cedar Knolls, we have 3 candidates vying for 2 seats. Tom Quirk, our own Silvio Esposito, and Michael Dugan Jr. District budget proposals there are to adjust the rate from .087 to .089 per 100, which will raise the total budget to a little bit over $1.3 million. Voting there will take place at the Cedar Knolls Firehouse itself, again Saturday, between 2 p.m. and 9 p.m. Moving on to the Hanover Sewage Authority, they had their reorganization meeting on February 5th. Basically, they voted the slate, if you will. Dennis Dietrich remains the chairman, Bill Cooner remains the vice chairman, and Bill Byrne remains the secretary. And then last but never least, the Hanover Township Landmark Commission just put out their latest and greatest tour of historic sites. You'll probably find some of these out in the lobby. This was first published in 2016. It was just updated. This is the second edition. It's very good. It's short. It's a very quick read, but a lot of pictures and really highlights a lot of very interesting parts of this town that are unfortunately long forgotten. But generally, there's usually some of these out in the lobby, and if not, then we'll make sure to get some.
Very nice, yeah, and a nice brochure, I might add.
Very nice, yeah.
They did a good job. Michael?
Hi, good evening. I want to start with the veterans. There was an article came out in the paper. I just want to clarify things a little bit. Yes, I am chairing it, but I'm certainly not doing it alone. We've got a lot of people that are helping us. The Veterans Alliance is still very integral in helping. Mike McCrory and his crew are still, really, we're working off of their template. I want to point out George Coppola is also helping us with that. He kind of got missed in the paper, but George Coppola is chairing one. We broke it into 3 sections. George Coppola is chairing, Gary Kaiser, Ace, and Brian Cahill are also chairing a section of it, in the addition of Mr. Francioli and Mr. Faramosca. So everybody is chipping in, and I want to thank them for it. It just became the time, the veterans, it's a lot of work, and they needed some help. So we're all stepping up, and there may be a time when I'll actually reach out to the public to get a few more hands in to help out with that. But yes, we are definitely having a parade. It'll be on Memorial Day, that Monday of Memorial Day weekend. So pencil that in, and hopefully it should be a good one. On to senior citizens. I'm the liaison for that. We have our monthly meetings. They meet twice a month, the first and third Wednesday. The socializing starts around 10 o'clock. The meeting starts around 12. So if you're of age, please come out. It's a very active group. They're just shy of 300 members. And again, they have an April trip coming up to Wind Creek Casino. Their May trip is to the Westchester Broadway Theater of Cinderella. And every month they're going somewhere. Again, very good group, very active. Get involved. Get involved. Check it out. It's again, it's a good group of people. I really, I highly recommend that. And I also want to say congratulations again to Ken Oxley. He's the new president. George Coppola had stepped back to vice, and the rest of the crew has stayed the same. So again, congratulations to Ken. He'll do a terrific job. Again, if you're of age, come on out. It's a great group of people. Recreation. Always busy at recreation. We have a couple trips that are coming up. Just so you know, unfortunately, it's already closed, but our traveling teens, because there's no school on Monday, they put a program together to go out to Aquatopia out in Pennsylvania. So the kids are able to go, they sign up, and it gives them something to do for the day. Unfortunately, it's already closed, and it is already Monday. But there's always stuff to do. Check out that website. There is a trip going to Atlantic City in March 22nd. Still seats available, so if you're interested in that, reach out for that. Our April trip to the Paper Mill Playhouse is already closed. It's already sold out. Sister Act is the play. They always go to Charlie Brown's for dinner. But again, keep in touch. Check out the website. There's always stuff going on. Several events coming out, and I can't stress enough. We have the Pat Sages Memorial Basketball on March 14th. It's going to be 3-on-3 basketball tournament. You can sign up as a team, or you can sign up as an individual, and they'll put you on a team. It's Pat passed away. He was part of the Board of Recreation. Very active member. Loved basketball. Loved baseball. And this was just a tournament they put together. The proceeds from the from the tournament are going to purchase and upkeep of AEDs throughout our parks. Again, if you're interested, and if you're not, if you even want to just sponsor, check out the website. Information is there. Please come out and support that. Gentlemen, mark your calendars. March 28th, hopping down the Bunny Trail at the Community Center, 2 to 4 o'clock. The bunny will be coming out. So for the youngsters, put that on your calendar too. One thing, and I'm sure a lot of you have read the ordinances and resolutions coming up. Believe it or not, it's the pool time coming up. Registrations will be coming out soon. and we got some improvements that we're looking forward to. The slide is being replaced with a dual flume slide, and we have high hopes. Engineering is going to come through for us, and we also have a rock wall that we're working on putting in. It looks like a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to having that, so we're making some improvements. We did had a minor adjustment to the rates. We went up $5, sorry. But we did also put in a corporate rate. So if there are people that work in town, you can get a corporate rate, and your family can meet you at the pool, and you can come during your lunchtime, after lunch. There's noodle nights, there's DJ nights, there's all kinds of stuff, teen nights going on constantly over at the pool. It's a lot of fun, a lot of stuff goes on, and a lot of credit to the guys and gals that really put that together. So keep an eye out. If you've been involved in the pool before, you'll get your application soon. If you have not, again, reach out to the rec center, and they'll get you signed up. It's a great place to go.
Very good. Excellent, very good, thank you. Good. Deputy Mayor Fairmosca.
Okay.
What's happening?
Planning update. After almost 20 years in planning, we've got some news on Whippany Village. Whippany Village is now showing signs of life. Planning Board heard and reviewed and approved the application for Starbucks, so that's approved, number one. Number two, the Planning Board will be hearing an application in March for what you know as the old PNC Bank Building. So that'll be in March. And the big news is the Planning Board finalized the elements of what they call the Developers Agreement for Whippany Village itself. And the two remaining elements that the Planning Board worked on was what's called the landscape plan, as well as the open area plan, because the design of the concept, I know it's been so long, was for it to be pedestrian-friendly environment, for there to be areas where there would be some seating. So there would be areas, so when you went doing your shopping and you wanted to take a break, you could walk along a trail. So we were very encouraged. It is a very, very nice design. It fits the overall architectural thematic which the Planning Board established. So good news from planning. From an economic development standpoint, economic development in anticipation of what they see as increased growth, fueled in large part in our town by affordable housing, they're working on strategies to improve quality of life. And one of the strategies which they're working on is called a business improvement district. So they've gone out, they've done a tremendous amount of research for us on how that works, what towns are doing, and they've just gone through their initial presentation. We'll be bringing that information shortly to Township Committee for review. The next important element is what's called a transportation improvement plan. The transportation improvement plan really is something that Hanover is forced to take a lead position in Morris County because it's not being done by the higher level county level. Hanover sees the traffic onslaught. We experience it, we live it, day in and day out. We're blessed and we're cursed by the interstate road system that traverse our community. What we're trying to do from an economic development standpoint is to work with multiple communities to determine what can be done in terms of intersection improvements, what can be done in terms of transportation. So this is a big project that they're working on in an advisory sense, and we appreciate the work that they're bringing to us. From an environmental standpoint, the Green Team is launching a new speaker series in conjunction with the library, and there's some fun things going on here. They're going to kick off their series on March 10th at our library at 6:30 with something called the ABCs of lawn care. So let's say you've got a lawn that's predominantly good, but there's some areas that are not so good, and you want to learn what to do, there's going to be an expert coming to us from Rutgers to discuss that with you. So I think that's a good initiative. Their second initiative will be education about the Whippany River. That'll be in June. There'll be cleanup opportunities as well with some corporations in our municipality that want to advance that. And I want to call out one other one tonight in our resolutions. Tonight, we had a resolution that supported a initiative of the Green Team called composting. So this was brought to us by our newest Green Team member, Chris Medicic, and we thank Chris. And Chris's idea has gone from concept to tonight a resolution for submission for the grant. So it's good news, and we hope to get that grant money to allow us to implement a test within our township, so to support this environmentally friendly initiative. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, very good, very good. And Chris, we thank you too for the Stony Brook Farm will take the benefit of the composting that we're looking at and the grant that you're looking into right now. That'll be wonderful, just work hand in glove with what we're trying to do with the community farm. So we appreciate that very much. We have some exceptional news tonight to bring to you. Hanover Township has once again taken the lead on something of critical nature. You heard Committeeman Faramasca speak about the traffic situations in this area. It's been a plaguing problem for all our municipalities. It's not getting any easier. Hanover Township's become the beneficiary of a lot of traffic from outside of Hanover Township that comes through here to use our highways, etc. And I always use the comment that all you need to do is stand on one of our roads at 330, like Cedar Knolls Road and Jefferson Road, and tell me where the traffic's coming from. The Florham Parks, the Madisons, and down all through that way they come up to our highways. So to that end, this past November, both the Deputy Mayor and I made a presentation to the League of Municipalities and the mayors down there on a resolution that we would hope they would adopt. And that resolution was to make the traffic impacts caused by developers, in this particular case, contributions to mass transit and other types of solutions in moving traffic and improving transportation throughout the area. That resolution went to them for consideration back in November. We stayed with it, we followed it, we did some lobbying. Received a phone call a few weeks ago that it was going to be considered by the Senate Community and Urban Committee for consideration before the Senate. We received word today through Senator Cody's office, some other outlets, that it was approved. So it will now be taken to a second stage. That second stage, and I don't give anyone any misinformation, and by the way, many people to be thanked, and they will be shortly on this, that the bill will now be seconded and referenced to the Senate Appropriations Committee for another hearing. After that, it will need to be voted on by the full Senate and the Assembly, and then it will be introduced as their own bill, after which this will then be given to the governor for his approval and signature, and I hope the governor gives us all due consideration when he considers all the impacts that we suburban areas are taking with the fair share housing obligations that have been put on us. So we are very proud to be Hanover once again to be the sponsor of this bill, S-368. A lot of people thank Doug, appreciate you getting on board with this, and social networking as well. Terry, supportive of it as well. A lot of people have come forward and made phone calls and reached out. Apologize for any wrong numbers I might have put out there. In any event, you were heard. And Mr. Cody's office said that they were inundated. So you definitely were heard, and the committee was heard. So we will follow it now to the next stage. We're not out of the woods yet, so to speak, and I think we should keep the pressure up. Both the Deputy Mayor and I will probably be coming together to design a letter to send out to all the other mayors of the state, asking them to get behind this as well, gain some more momentum from them, so that when it finally gets to His Honor, the Governor's office, it's ready for signature. So I thank you all. John, I thank you for all your support on this. It was a long day down in Trenton, but we got there, so thank you all. Very good. Any other comments from the Township Committee at this time? None? Hearing none. Okay, motion to close?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you. Together on that letter.
Yeah.